All right, so we're going to start this out by asking ourselves this question. What does the word Kenite mean? And I got a couple slides up here that we'll go over. This one is a definition from the Strong's Concordance. It's Hebrew word 7014. It's pronounced Kayan. It's the same as 7013 with a play upon the affinity to 7069. Kayan, the name of the first child. Also a place in Palestine and of an oriental tribe. Cain and Kenites are the way this Hebrew word has been translated into the English. Now I'll go one more slide here, and then we can kind of talk about this a little bit. This is from the Encyclopedia Britannica, and it says here, a Kenite is a member of the tribe of itinerant metalsmiths related to the Midianites and the Israelites who plied their trade while traveling in the region of the Arabia, the desert Rift Valley extending from the Sea of Galilee to the Gulf of Aqaba. From at least the 13th century to the 9th century BC, the Kenites, now here's what I came here for most of all, the Kenites' name was derived from Cain, whose descendants they were believed to be. The Kenites are mentioned several times in the Old Testament. Now here's a verse here that we can maybe discuss a little bit later, not a verse, but a part of the definition here we can maybe go over if we have time here. The father-in-law of Moses, Jethro, was a Kenite, or at least he was called a Kenite, and as priest leader of the tribe, he led the worship of Yahweh, whom Moses later revealed to the Hebrews as their own God, whom they had forgotten. In the period of the Judges, 12th to the 11th century BC, it was a Kenite woman, Jael, who killed the general of Israel's enemies, the Canaanites. Settling among the Israelites, Amalekites, and Canaanites, the Kenites apparently became, now check this out, absorbed into the tribe of Judah. And that's really important because when we get to the New Testament times, Christ calls out many of these Kenites and even says that they are descendants of Cain.
Yeah, I think it's important to say right off the bat here that, of course, Kenites, sons of Cain, are not part of Israel. They are very distant from Israel.
Right.
Cain being, a line that started right after Eve, Adam and Eve, and of course being of the serpent's seed, right. Not Adam's seed. But Israel, coming far, far later, was no relation to Cain. But as you were saying, you got the Kenites living in close proximity to Israel.
Right, they didn't become absorbed as far as becoming part of the tribe. They're like the tares that contaminated the tribe.
Right.
Tribe of Judah. And many of them claim to be of Judah today. Mm-hmm. And that's why there's a lot of stigma, if you would, to the Jewish people today, is because many of these Kenites had mixed in with Judah.
Oh, yeah, and like you've probably heard before, the Kenites have caused our true brother Judah all sorts of accusation and right. Problem. So it's important not to confuse the two.
Right. So overall what we're looking at here is the word Kenite in the Hebrew means sons of Cain.
Right.
And
it's important on that article there, too. You mentioned that the third paragraph, settling among the Israelites, the Amalekites, and the Canaanites. And the Canaanites is an important part because in Zechariah 14, we'll document that the Canaanites are basically in control of, what does it say? No more the Canaanite in the house of the Lord of hosts.
Yeah.
So just pick that up.
Yeah. Well, what you're saying is, we don't want to confuse Canaan with Cain again.
No, but they settled.
But they were in that land, the land of Canaan. Canaan right. being a son through Noah and what was it? Ham was a result of that. But anyway, so you got Cain, Kenites, Canaan, Canaanites. different things.
Well, this whole land was...
But the Kenites lived in that land of Canaan.
Right. They were absorbed into those groups, is
Mm-hmm.
how I see it anyway. And this is, Israel, even when they were taken into captivity in Egypt, they had to come back into and conquer this land. They were all throughout this whole land.
Yeah.
And it was the Kenites that were there saying, hey, let's pretend that we came from a far distance and we're run down and so on and so forth. That was in Deuteronomy, I think.
The book of Joshua. And
Joshua too.
And there was...
and they were like the next town over.
It mentions 4 cities full of the Hivites who we believe were Kenites.
Right.
And...
well, the only point I made on Zechariah 14 was that this is on the Lord's day when he returns. He says, "There shall no more the Canaanite be in the land, in his land."
And I think,
documenting that they are there up until the Lord's day.
And I think another thing that's important to document here, so that people just don't think that we're just full of a bunch of hooey and making stuff up. The Kenites are listed in 1 Chronicles 2:55 as being the scribes for Judah.
Right.
And I don't. Maybe you want to go there now, and or I could read it.
Let me pull it up on Blue Letter Bible.
Okay.
And while I'm going there, I'm just going to mention that the Kenites and Canaanites aren't really all that much different after the Canaanites had become infused with the fallen angels of Genesis 6.
Yeah.
Because many of the Canaanites, that's one reason why God wanted the Canaanites exterminated from the land of Palestine, was that their DNA was part demonic as well, by the fallen angels. Whereas the Kenites are direct sons of Satan himself.
Right.
So all demonic hybrids, if you would.
Yes, and people, a lot of people will think, oh, it was just horrible. What God would tell the Israelites to go into the land of Canaan and kill everything? I mean, to kill the men, the women, the children, the animals even. Well, because of what you're talking about, you had these hybrids in there, and you had all sorts of abomination going on there, where you had not just homosexuality and things like that going on, but you had bestiality going on there. So that's one of the reasons why the Israelites were told to even kill the animals.
You know, it's an important thing that you mentioned there too, because it's apparent that if we're talking about the land of Canaan, and I'm not sure of the year, I guess I don't have my companion with me, but it's clearly that these people made it through the flood of Noah. So how could that flood possibly even be worldwide if, I guess that would be documentation that it wasn't worldwide.
Well, let's read the 1 Chronicles 2:55.
Sure.
And then I had a slide on that where that would be our next question that you're getting into. So we'll read this about the scribes and how they became absorbed into the tribe of Judah. That's kind of why we're here.
All right.
I'm assuming here. But 1 Chronicles 2, verse 55.
You should explain this chapter is the lineage of Judah.
Good point.
Okay.
Because they were attached to the end of that lineage.
Right. Let me go to the very beginning. Is that where it says, okay. Now these, in 1 Chronicles 2, verse 1, now these are the sons of Israel, Reuben, Simeon, Levi, Judah, Issachar, and Zebulun. And then it goes down probably to Judah.
Yeah, there, verse 3, the sons of Judah.
Okay, so that's where it starts, this genealogy?
Yeah.
Okay. So verse 3, it says the sons of Judah, and then it goes on and starts listing it. And then we get down to the bottom, when we go through this list, and we see, no doubt this is why the definition was that they became absorbed into the tribe of Judah, is because of this verse right here. Verse 55. And the families of the scribes which dwelt at Jabez, the Terathites, I'm going to do my best here, and the Shimeathites. Okay.
I think so.
And the Sukkothites. These are the Kenites that came from Hemath, the father of the house of Rechab. So here we even have different tribes of the Kenites mentioned here.
And they're the scribes for Judah.
Right.
So, and I think, I think it is supposition when we go back and look at Joshua and we see that the Hivites had tricked Joshua into a treaty because the Israelites were coming in and they were exterminating everybody in the land, and the Hivites had seen this happen, so they sent an ambassador to Joshua with full of a bunch of made-up stories to tell Joshua that we're from a land far away, and you can see our clothing is all worn from our long travels,
and even
our shoes.
It even describes the guy even said, "Hey, let's put on our worst clothing, and then let's go approach him. Let's make it look like we were really run down."
Yeah, and because they knew that Joshua was coming in there, and they even told Joshua, we want to be your servants. We've heard what about your God bringing you guys out of Egypt, and we want to serve you. And of course Joshua, he doesn't know who they are, and he says, "You want to serve us?" And they say, "Oh yeah, we know all about your God,
the word is out,
the Lord God, and we want to make a treaty with you." And of course they wanted to make a treaty with Joshua because they didn't want to get killed and exterminated.
Right.
And there was about 4 cities of these people that were all of the Hivites, and the supposition is that they were the Kenites. And because of what happened to them after Joshua found out their treachery, then instead of killing them or driving them out, which he probably should have at least driven them out, he sentences them to service in the temple, to cut wood and draw water for the temple.
Right.
And of course, we see later on in Scripture that the people that were the servants of the temple are the Nethinims. And so you have to piece it together to find out who's who. It doesn't come right out and say these guys were Kenites. But if they were put into service in the temple, they were the Nethinims, and the Nethinim, actually worked their way up here in 1 Chronicles 2:55 to become the scribes for Judah.
So that was a very foolish thing of Joshua to do.
Yes.
He thought of it as a punishment, but it gave them opportunity.
Yes.
It was probably part of their master plan to work their way into the temple. They probably offered it.
And it was because Joshua had given them his word and sworn on it by God, by the Lord God, that he felt obligated not to kill them.
That's a good example of how Joshua was deceived by the Kenites, is how many Christians are deceived by them today and give their support to them.
Mm-hmm.
There are many big preachers out there that, they want to support the modern day nation of Israel, the Israeli nation, when they reject Jesus Christ overall.
Mm-hmm.
And we could go into that another time, but let's go to this question here. So anyways, the Kenites use trickery. That's one of their methods. They are play actors. They play the pity trip, like, or
we're the victims.
We're the victims, and please help us, and we're innocent and harmless. But then they are the most evil people on this earth.
Diabolical. Mm-hmm. They have like an ulterior motive for their own cause, I guess is what you say. I don't know.
And many times it doesn't come off as evil to people. It's just that they are so...
no, it comes off peaceably, just like Satan will. Peaceably and prosperously. It's all about that.
Right.
So they have to put on this facade of, hey, we're the, we're these peaceful people and stuff like that, and we're victims and so forth. That should be...
That's just like the serpent. That's the serpent's MO.
That is a mark right there.
Yeah.
So...
Yeah, that's a mark of Cain right there. You wouldn't think of... A lot of people, when they think of Kenites, they think of, some big drug addict that's a big meanie, and he's, obviously evil. He's got tattoos all over his body or whatever of demons.
In Ezekiel chapter 8, the Nethinims were appointed to the service of the Levites. So that ought to tell you that they're going to put on a holy facade. They're going to look very religious and so forth, right? So, and if they're the scribes, what are they scribing? They're transcribing text from generation to generation.
Right.
And which is a good thing they came up with the Masra.
Yeah.
To protect it.
And that's their, being that they are the scribes that we read about in 1 Chronicles 2, today even most of our history books in schools and things like that have been contaminated by those same people, these Kenites.
Yeah,
what we were just talking about here too with Joshua and all, just to document that's in for the listener. It's Joshua chapter 10. Speaks of all this, and another point here would be after Joshua finds out that he's he's been tricked by them and then puts them, sentences them to service in the temple. They've got these 4 cities full of their people, and there's the kings of the Amorites in Canaan there have found out that the Hivites have made this treaty with Joshua, and they're all upset because the Hivites were a powerful people too, and if they would succumb to Joshua and make a treaty with him, well, they wanted to make an example out of the Hivites, so they wanted to go and attack the Hivites, and now the Hivites found out about this, so they go crying to Joshua for help. And what do you think happens? Joshua goes and fights these 5 kings that are after the Hivites, who we believe were Kenites, and does the military work for them.
Well, it sounds like Judeo-Christianity today, in many ways.
And today, we find these same people asking for our help a lot.
Right.
As long as you're in Chronicles, 1 Chronicles 2:55, I guess it's important to mention Hemath, and that came of Hemath, the father of the house of Rechab. And Hemath is mentioned a couple times, and one particularly in Amos chapter 6. I think it's mentioned about 3 times in the Bible. But Rechab, the Rechabites, were of that same old lineage, but God actually honored them. Didn't we cover this in one of our other studies?
We never talked about the
No, we didn't talk about. You're talking about the wine and all that?
Yep, the wine, where he was talking to Jeremiah, not Jeremiah, the book of Jeremiah, but another Jeremiah to bring them in before them.
Jeremiah?
Yep, yeah, the Kenite Jeremiah. And to have him telling him, hey, drink this wine. And they said they wouldn't. And God honored them because they listened to their fathers when the house of Israel wouldn't even listen to God.
Yeah.
So, but I guess documenting there a little bit of who we're talking about here, the Rechabites.
Right. I'm gonna.
And then they come of that. So
I'm going to read that. Unless you'd like to read it.
No, go ahead.
Okay. It says, Jeremiah 35 verse 1. It says, the word which came unto Jeremiah from the Lord in the days of Jehoiakim, the son of Josiah, king of Judah, saying, go into the house of the Rechabites. And, of course, we just read in Chronicles that the Rechabites were Kenites.
Yep.
And fathers of those scribes. And speak unto them and bring them into the house of the Lord, into one of the chambers, and give them wine to drink. And then I took Jazaniah, the son of Jeremiah, the son of Habazaniah, and his
That's
brethren,
pretty good.
and all his sons, and the whole house of the Rechabites. So it looks like they have a Jeremiah there. They like to mask themselves under godly names.
It's important to note that is a different Jeremiah because the father is a different father than Jeremiah.
Right.
The book of Jeremiah.
Exactly. And I brought them into the house of the Lord, into the chamber of the sons of Hanan, the son of Igdaliah, a man of God, which was by the chamber of the princes, which was above the chamber of Maaseiah, the son of Shalom, the keeper of the door. Okay. And it reads here, and I set before the sons of the house of the Rechabites pots full of wine and cups, and I said unto them, drink ye wine. And verse 6, but they said, we will drink no wine, for Jonadab, the son of Rechab, our father, commanded us, saying, you shall drink no wine, neither ye nor your sons forever. Now I think this it's kind of neat, because I almost look at this as a Holy Communion.
Yeah.
In a sense, when Christ gave the wine, that they
refused to have communion.
Overall, they would not accept Christ.
It's interesting because in a lot of churches today, they won't drink wine. It's all grape juice and stuff.
Right.
And I don't know. In my opinion, Satan's got his claws in a lot of churches, and that's probably where that tradition came from.
Right.
So.
And basically, too, what we have here is this. This was a certain sect of the Kenites who refused to drink wine or alcohol, and we know. Some people have dug deep into the protocols of our enemy. They want to have everybody else get, in a drunken stupor with alcohol and overindulgence in liquor, so they themselves can always be one step ahead with a clear mind to perform their tasks.
Yep.
There's one thing. There's one thing I'd like to bring up now, since it's fresh in everybody's mind. When we're talking about Rechab as being, the father of a lot of these Kenites, right? Well, you had Jehu, who was back in the northern kingdom of Israel. He went in there and slew the remaining members of the house of Ahab. And because Ahab had been a wicked king and done a lot of bad things, and Jehu was cleaning house. And so Jehu goes in there and slew all these folks.
Are you in a particular book here?
And for reference, if you want to go to 2 Kings, and I was going to, the verse in question here that I was going to go to was 2 Kings chapter 10, verse 15. And after doing all of this, there's a guy named Jehonadab, right, who's the son of Rechab. And it says here, and when he departed thence, and he's talking about Jehu here, the guy who had just done all this good work getting rid of all these bad leaders of Israel. Anyway, he lighted upon Jehonadab, the son of Rechab, coming to meet him, and he saluted him and said to him, "Is thine heart as my heart is with thy heart?" And Jehonadab answered and said, "It is."
Yeah.
And if it be, give me thine hand. And he gave him his hand and took him up into his chariot. Now,
so you let the enemy into his camp, essentially, right?
What we're talking about here, we're talking about the Kenite. Now because Jehu now is becoming the new leader in Israel.
Yeah. And
the Kenites love to get attached to the leaders of Israel. And they always have. You go back, even back here in the northern kingdom of Israel. And, today it's no different. The Kenites attach themselves to our leaders today, and they infest our governments big time. And there is a very disproportionate amount of Kenites holding high office and in high position in the leadership of this nation.
Right, and Jonadab actually helped the king of Israel destroy all the Baal worshippers.
Right.
So he's saying, I'm right with. They always come up to our leaders and buddy with them and say we have I'll either help you or we have a common enemy. Now today, with this nation over there in the Middle East that claims to be of Judah, they're always selling us on the idea that our enemies are their enemies.
Right.
And that if they weren't there, we'd have to deal with them here and all this stuff.
Just as they did back in the days of Joshua.
Right.
Yeah.
It's no different. And Christians fall for that every time. And it should be an obvious thing. I'm going to get in Revelation, we're going to be teaching about the Antichrist pretty soon. And it's really simple. In the epistles of John, it says, "Who is Antichrist? But he that denieth that Jesus is the Christ." Mm-hmm. And he says, even now there are many antichrists in the world. So it's when a nation of people rejects Jesus Christ, we're not supposed to bind ourselves in an oath with them, like with Jonadab, or yoke ourselves to them in any way. Christians are supposed to stay separate.
And see, in not Jehonadab's defense, but in Jehu's defense, he had no idea what the background of Jehonadab was, as far as the serpent seed goes and everything. Just as our leaders here in this country have no idea. As far as they're concerned, these Kenites, they think that these Kenites are the chosen people of God. And
which might explain
so
why
you can't really
we
blame
come
our
to
leaders.
Why we try to bond with them so strongly, because some people don't want to have the curse, that would fall upon people that go against Israel or whatever. And not realizing that
they're imposters.
Israel's worldwide, right?
Well, since we're moving into that, I'm going to read this question on this slide because this falls into what we're talking about now. Why is it important to know about the Kenites? Number one, like we just read, or like like Don just read, my dad, he read about Jehonadab tricking the king of Israel. Mm-hmm. And that's why we need to know, because Jehu did not know.
Yeah, and so that's why we need to know today. Jesus Christ has revealed this secret to us.
Right.
So now we know, and we can use all these examples from the Old Testament as examples for us to what to do today. And one of the reasons why we should know who these folks are is because we don't want to invite them into our chariot.
It's probably a little late for that. What the important thing,
I'm
because
talking,
they are in our chariot.
Right, but I'm talking in an individual
Okay,
sense.
but it's important, I guess, on a broader scope, important to know who they are because they
Mm-hmm.
do want to work their way into strong positions of power of all the nations to guide policy in their favor.
And they have.
And they've done that.
And they have, and we're not advocating that people try to get rid of them or anything like that because we know that it's too late for that.
No, but it's important to know who they are.
But personally, if we know who they are, we can do whatever we can so that we are personally not hurt by them. Right. And we don't want to invite them into our chariot. We don't want to fall into the trap of taking on debt, that they're making the money off of.
Yeah, the debt thing's important, like getting into a business venture.
Because the money changers try to get everyone indebted to them, and if we know who they are,
it's important.
Then we can at least try to do our best to stay out of a burden of debt that they encourage everyone to do.
It's important to know that these money changers are the scribes. They were in the temple way back then, and as long as we're talking money changers, I mean, and if someone wants an example of how can we be hurt by these people? Well, take a look at our tax system and the burden that you have. A quarter of your check goes to the government.
Right.
Actually, it doesn't even go to the government. They just take the money and collect it, and it goes to pay off interest from loans that were taken from these people.
Right.
So,
well, and another reason, obviously, so you stay out of business ventures, you don't fall into debt, but is that it's important that we're aware of them so we don't let them in our ministries. Because they will come into ministries and take over. They might say, well, hey, I'll do your book work for you, or let me just do this and that. But if you have eyes to see and ears to hear, and you're doing a ministry for God, you can tell just by looking at them that, whoa, wait a second. That is one of them.
They will try and work their way up the ladder. Like Don mentioned, they were supposed to handle the wood and the fires and stuff like that. And ultimately they were the scribes. And then soon enough, they became part of the Sanhedrin or the Pharisees that were the leadership.
Next thing you know, they're sitting in Moses' seat.
Exactly.
Right. Because when Ezra and Nehemiah brought the 42,000 Jews back from Babylon to rebuild the temple and the city walls, they found out that none of the priests who were supposed to be Levites could show their proof of their heritage.
It was like a third
Levites.
of the people altogether.
Yeah, and so they had all these priests, and Ezra couldn't find even one that could prove his heritage. So he had to send back to Babylon and get some documented Levites to come in and be the priests to help set up the temple.
Right.
And that's how far it went. Even way back then, they had worked their way into the priesthood. Well, hopefully then Ezra weeded most of them out. But by the time of Christ, we're talking at least another 400 years or so. Now at Christ's time, who are the Pharisees and the scribes? They took over again, and they probably took over for a lot longer than just a little while.
What's an example of how Judah became lazy? They didn't want to do that task anymore or something. It's an important thing you mentioned, 42,000 that they brought back here. Now, we know that from the time in Egypt, over the course of, it was a couple hundred years, but even since Abraham to them coming out of the Exodus, it was 430 years, they had grown immensely, right?
Yep.
Now, even by this time, Judah would have numbered in the millions, probably, by this time. Wouldn't you say? By the time they came out of Babylon,
only 42,000 returned.
No, that's what I'm saying. But if the way they procreated, where did the rest of them go?
Okay, well,
did they migrate? Well, a lot of them were in the Assyrian captivity.
The Assyrian captivity, most of Judah, from my just very simple rudimentary calculations, about 16% of Judah did not go into Assyrian captivity. They stayed behind in Jerusalem.
Okay.
And Jerusalem, was the only city that survived the Assyrian captivity. About 84% of Judah went into Assyrian captivity, and they never returned.
Exactly. So where did they go?
They migrated
with
the other 10 tribes across the Caucasus Mountains.
More documentation
and
that they are now spread throughout Europe, throughout America, anywhere but that land.
The true history.
So you
had of Israel.
So you had a
Even
smaller
Judah.
amount.
Right.
So you had a very small amount of Judah which was still in Jerusalem at the time of the Babylonian captivity,
Right.
and they were removed and brought to Babylon. And then when the king of Persia and the Medes defeated Babylon, then they allowed the Jews to go back to Jerusalem and set up the temple and the city walls. Ezra and Nehemiah were the leaders of that, and the king of Persia even paid for the temple and the walls to be built. But when Ezra came back, if you look in the book of Ezra or the book of Nehemiah, we see that a lot of the families that came back with Ezra were Nethinims, and Nethinims were the servants in the temple. They were non-Israelites, and of course these were the same people who had taken over the priesthood.
So during the time of Christ, the priesthood, even the tribe of Judah itself, had become very contaminated with these Kenites.
Yes,
infused with them. And Christ referred to them, I don't know if we're going to go there today, but in the Matthew chapter 13, he referred to them as the tares sown among the wheat. Mm-hmm. And but we'll probably go there probably in a little while here. But let me just say one thing about this question of why it's important that we understand who the Kenites are. Because ultimately, obviously they work into our churches, they start writing the teachings, the sermons, and things like that. But ultimately, knowing who they are will help keep you from going after their Messiah.
I was just going to say that.
Because it all leads to the
their
false
Messiah, is not Christ.
Right. And all their different teachings that they work in will just be little twists here and there. And Judeo-Christianity today is being primed to accept the false Messiah, the Kenites' Messiah, and so on. And then if you go to Revelation chapter 17 and 18, there's the symbol of Mystery Babylon, the great harlot, she's got a cup in her hand, and she's intoxicated the whole world with her lies. I have no doubt that is a symbol of the nation of Kenites. Just as Revelation 12 verse 1, the woman with the crown of 12
Revelation
stars.
Revelation 16 though?
Is it 16? 17 and 18. I think 16 is the vials. But so you have the good woman, Mother Israel, in Revelation 12. She's pure. She's clothed with the sun, clothed with light. She's
7 candlesticks.
Right. And then you have Mystery Babylon, and she is false Israel.
And that's Revelation 17 verse 5 talks about Mystery Babylon.
Right.
Yep. And it's like sort of a descriptive preview of Revelation 13, the beast out of the sea, and describing more about what that's all about.
Now let's go back to this. I'll just mention this. I thought I had some information on it. I thought I had a.
While you're looking that up, okay. Why would we have something called Mystery Babylon in Revelation? If you look back at history, ancient Babylon took Jerusalem into captivity for 70 years. Mm-hmm. Okay? And now we've got Mystery Babylon controlling Jerusalem, and they have since 1948. And so if anybody's wondering why is this Mystery Babylon, well, we're talking about the Kenites, the Nethinim, who are controlling Jerusalem now.
Let's go over there and read this. Revelation 17, verse 1. And there, we're going here for Mystery Babylon. And there came one of the 7 angels which had the 7 vials, and talked with me, saying unto me, Come hither, and I will show thee the judgment of the great whore that sitteth upon many waters, with whom the kings of the earth have committed fornication, and the inhabitant. Remember all the instances in the Old Testament with Jehu and Jehonadab, with whom the kings of the earth, and Joshua even, with whom the kings of the earth have committed fornication.
And we're talking about idolatry.
Idolatry, right?
Right.
Yep. And getting in bed with, joining, making covenants.
Right, with other...
symbolic fornication.
Yep.
Right.
Yeah. So symbolic fornication is making covenants with other peoples other than God, and worshiping and getting into idolatry. But so that's what it is. So all the kings of the earth, she's caused the kings of the earth to commit fornication, and the inhabitants of the earth have been made drunk with the wine of her fornication.
Who are they?
That's everybody.
All the people
Yeah.
in the world. Yeah. Now, if that hasn't happened, this would be a lie. Clearly, this is what's going on right now. The people are not being fed the truth.
Right. They're being fed the lies of the Kenites.
Right.
Going all the way back to 1 Chronicles 2, verse 55, the scribes.
You know, it's interesting. You mentioned in verse 1 there, it says, come hither. And I was just thinking that if that was come up hither, it'd probably be like rapture too.
Oh, yeah. So they could make a rapture of that, huh?
So they must only be talking to John here, not the church. So.
Yes, exactly. Good point.
I mean, that's how silly that whole thing in the rapture was. So.
Right.
Anyway.
Okay, so, verse 3. So he carried me away in the spirit into the wilderness, and I saw a woman sit upon a scarlet-colored beast, full of names of blasphemy, having 7 heads and 10 horns. And the woman was arrayed in purple and scarlet color, and decked with gold and precious stones and pearls, having a golden cup in her hand, full of abominations and the filthiness of her fornication. And upon her forehead was a name written. Yep.
Before you, just to kind of break into that verse here, this woman here appears very royal.
Right.
Okay, she's decked out in fine linen and so forth with a golden cup, so she looks holy.
Right, exactly.
So,
good point.
Another method of fooling people.
She's somebody's queen. She's somebody's whore, and that is Satan's. This is Satan's whore. This is his prostitute. And I mean, isn't it? God speaks in pretty plain language, doesn't he?
I guess you're right. But I mean, I would say this does denote there's some religious aspect to the whole thing.
But he pimps her out to seduce the nations of the world, to seduce our people. Just like Satan uses the Kenites to suck us into this false system of belief.
Yeah.
And if people are wondering, well, how is that possible? Well, have you ever looked at the world banking system, which basically controls the finances and economies of the whole world?
That's why she's
when
decked
they loan out 50 times what they have in assets and so on.
You want to know where all the gold
to bring us deeper into bondage, into mystery Babylon.
They print money out of thin air, and then they loan it, and they collect principal and interest on the money that they just made out of nothing.
They're stealing your labor and the fruits of them, of your labor.
But who's collecting all the gold? Mystery Babylon. You see, she's decked with gold. And she has all the precious stones. So she actually has the real material wealth, where she's giving us the paper that we're playing with and credit.
Yeah, pretty much.
So this one thing I'd like to put in here right now too is at the time of Christ, you basically had you had the Nethinims, of course, who were the Kenites, and their descendants today are known as the Sephardic people, and they basically make up about let's say 10 to 15% of total worldwide Jewry, and but the majority of the Jews of today would be the Ashkenazis, who are descended from the Khazar kingdom, which was from 600 AD to 1100 AD, which was located, oddly enough, in Old Scythia.
I'm going to interrupt you right there. That's for anybody who hasn't read this book. The 13th tribe talks about how the Ashkenazi Jews were never even they were never even descendants of Judah.
Right,
they were converts.
Yeah, they were converts, and their king had converted that whole kingdom there, which was located, like I was saying, in Old Scythia, which was present-day Ukraine and part of Russia, just right by the Black and Caspian Sea, just above the Caucasus Mountains, ironically enough, where the tribes of Israel had first escaped the Assyrian captivity, who had been gone for hundreds of years before the Khazars came in. And but the reason that the king of the Khazars converted his kingdom was because the Christians to the north and the Muslims to the south were continually at war, and they were asking the Khazars, since the Khazars were right in between, to take sides. Well, the king of the Khazars, he didn't like the idea of taking sides, and his name was Kagan. And if you
which is
translate,
another offshoot of Cain,
if you translate Kagan, it means Cain. And anyway, he takes a political decision in 740 A.D. and he converts his entire nation to Judaism. So that here all of a sudden you've got all this whole country of pagans in 740 years after Christ becomes Jews.
Right.
And like you were saying, they weren't descended from Judah. They had no relation to Judah.
So why did they do it, though? Why did
they did it because of the political reasons, so they wouldn't have to go to war against the Christians or the Muslims. They could be neutral, and they were actually an important in history because it kept the Muslims from coming up into Europe through the Caucasus Mountains, because you had them as a buffer there. But later on, when the Khazar nation fell, which was in about 1100 A.D., then all these Ashkenazi Khazar Jews migrated into Europe, into other parts of Europe. They went into Russia, they went into other Eastern European countries, and even into Germany. And today they are known as the Ashkenazis, and they make up 85 to 90% of the Jews worldwide, but they are no part of that family.
Right.
They are converts. They are a foreign people who came from Asia and migrated, into Khazaria.
And they are the people who most Christians today think are fulfilling Bible prophecy,
right,
as Judah returned to Jerusalem today.
So here you got the Sephardics on one hand, who are descendants from the Nethinims. My belief is that at the time of Christ, like we were saying, there was only 42,000 that had returned from Babylon to Jerusalem. And my belief is at the time of Christ, what little was left of true Judah would have converted to Christianity, when Christ was there.
Right.
And they would have stopped calling themselves Jews. But you still had the Nethinim, who wanted nothing to do with Christ. In fact, they were instrumental in having Christ crucified. Right. And of course, they stayed in Judaism. So my belief is the Sephardics today are none other than the descendants of the Nethinim. And now you've got the Ashkenazis also, who are the vast majority of them. And it brings clarity into Revelation 2:9 and Revelation 3:9, where Christ talks about those who say they are Jews and are not, but do lie and are the synagogue of Satan.
Great point.
Now we can understand why he said that.
Good point. Let's go to verse 6 of Revelation 17. And I saw the woman drunken with the blood of the saints and with the blood of the martyrs of Jesus. And when I saw her, I wondered with great admiration. Not admiration, but great wonder.
I think it's astonishment.
Astonishment, yeah. So Mystery Babylon is responsible for all the blood of the righteous people on earth. Now check this out. Let us go to Matthew chapter 23. Did Christ or the apostles ever teach about the sons of Cain? Matthew 23, well, here he starts out right away, verse 1. Then spake Jesus to the multitude and to his disciples, saying, the scribes and the Pharisees sit in Moses' seat. And like we've been going through great pains of documenting here, or talking about, is that many of these scribes and Pharisees were not actually true Levites. They were descendants of the Nethinim and so on, who were Kenites.
Or Judahites either. They weren't any part of the family of Israel.
Right. So you scroll down, and I'm not going to read the whole thing here. I'll go to verse 14. Christ says, "Woe unto you," and he has he's addressing them down, point after point here in this chapter. Then we go down to verse 14. He says, "Woe unto you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites." Now, the word hypocrites is play actors.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
They are actors, just like they did with Joshua and how they deceived him.
They are imposters.
They played off this game that they were this story that they were really poor and from a distant land and so forth. Anyways, for you devour widows' houses, and for a pretense make long prayer. So they look holy while they're destroying widows. Therefore you shall receive the greater damnation. Woe unto you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites! For you compass sea and land to make one proselyte. And when he is made, now check this out, you make him twofold more the child of hell than yourself. Just like today, that's why I'm stressing, people say we are Judeo-Christian. That they're trying to tie in Judaism and the Talmud and things like that with Christianity, or say we're just brothers, we need to work together, and that's making people twofold more the child of hell. So I'm going to scroll down.
Interesting, if you backed up to verse 13 as well,
okay.
He goes on, "But woe unto you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, for ye shut up the kingdom of heaven against men." And then he even says, "For you neither go in yourselves." They don't believe in the resurrection of Christ or anything Christian about this. So even though it's prior to that,
I'm glad you made us go back there, because 1 Chronicles 2:55 again, the Kenites were the scribes,
right?
And what they're trying to do is hide the truth,
right?
At every chance they get to.
Not just hide. Yeah, they want to hide the truth. Well, even in Ezekiel 13, when you're talking about the blinders and so forth, they were trying to veil the truth from those that would believe,
right? And
that's why sidetrack them.
That's why most Christian churches I dare say most Christian churches that you go into today, you're not going to get the real truth. You're going to get contaminated versions of different sermons and things that are actually written by these scribes and Pharisees, and different doctrines that have come from them to hide the truth. So I'm going to scroll down here, and
I know where you're going.
We're going to document that Christ did speak of the sons of Cain, and
pretty much calling out who these people are and how far back.
Well, I don't know how far you're going to go down, but
I'm going to start on verse 29 here. He says, "Woe unto you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, because you build the tombs of the prophets and garnish the sepulchres of the righteous." Remember we talked about Mystery Babylon? She was the one that had all the blood of God's servants on her hands. Mm-hmm. That's what I'm saying. Mystery Babylon represents the Kenite nation. Now we'll go to verse 30. "And say, if we had been in the days of our fathers, we would not have been partakers with them in the blood of the prophets." Christ says, "Wherefore ye be witnesses unto yourselves that you are the children of them which killed the prophets." Now he's not saying you're an Israelite because Israelites killed the prophets. He's saying, because he defines that here. "Fill ye up then the measure of your fathers, you do their works." Verse 33. "Ye serpents, ye generation or offspring of vipers, how can you escape the damnation of hell?"
And so what's a viper? A serpent?
Yeah,
who was in the garden?
Yeah, he's tying in the serpent seed here. But I'll go 2 more verses, and this will really make it clear here. "Wherefore, behold, I send unto you prophets and wise men and scribes, and some of them you shall kill and crucify, and some of them you shall scourge in your synagogues, and you shall persecute them from city to city." They do it today. Anybody who stands up for the truth, they are right after them. But verse 35, "That upon you may come all the righteous blood shed upon the earth, from the blood of righteous Abel
And who killed Abel?
Right, unto the blood of Zacharias, the son of Berechias, whom you slew between the temple and the altar.
And who killed Abel? Cain killed Abel.
Cain killed Abel.
So that's what he's saying.
They
are children of Cain.
Right, because he mentioned that they were doing the works of their fathers. He called them offspring of serpents, and now he mentions the blood of Abel being slain by their descendants.
Mm-hmm.
So these are so what Christ has done here, and if people are paying really close attention when reading this, these are, he just called them Kenites. He called them sons of Cain because he said, "You're of your fathers who slew," all the way back from Abel, not from he who slew Abel.
I'd like to go back to verse 27 here,
Okay.
and read this if you don't mind.
Sure.
Verse 27 in the same chapter we've been reading from. Woe unto you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites! For you are like unto whited sepulchres, which indeed appear beautiful outward, but are within full of dead men's bones and of all cleanliness. Now, if we go back and we
Uncleanliness.
Uncleanliness, okay, and or uncleanness. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
And anyway, what's being said there when he's talking about whited sepulchres? Okay.
Well, a sepulcher is a crypt. I mean, it's a grave.
Okay, and then he goes on here and he says, "Even so, ye also outwardly appear righteous unto men, but within ye are full of hypocrisy and iniquity. Woe unto you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, because you build the tombs of the prophets and garnish the sepulchres of the righteous." And what it's saying here is that these scribes and Pharisees, and of course we know the scribes were Kenites, right? And so were these Pharisees, especially after what we just read here. They're from Cain. Okay, they're building the tombs of the prophets. So what they're doing is they're saying, these prophets are our ancestors. And you even hear it today. You hear some of the leaders over there saying, "Oh, here's the tomb of the prophet Jeremiah," or something like that. Our ancestors. Well, baloney. Here they're play acting. They're hypocrites. They're saying these are the tombs of our ancestors. They're not even related. They're not even related to those people.
So they basically stole that identity, is what they did.
And and to garnish means they even decorate it, probably put flowers or whatever.
Yeah, they make it look all pretty on the outside, and inside there's like nothing there.
And they're
no
hiding
life.
it. They're hiding it from the true children of Israel. And we've been over this. The true children of Israel, were from the Assyrian captivity, migrated into Europe. They're basically, you've got the Saxons, the Anglo-Saxons, the Norse or Norwegians. You've got the Swedes. You've got some of the French, Germans, Scots, Irish, Picts, all these people, of Israel, who are the true children of Israel. They may not know it, but that's who they are. That is their lineage. And today, we've got the same thing going on here. The Kenites are building the prophets, the tombs of the prophets, saying those are our ancestors, and they hide as much as they possibly can from the true children of Israel because they don't want us to know who we actually are.
Because there's a war between the woman's seed and the serpent's seed, and they're stealing our inheritance.
And it's not that hard to go back. I mean, you do have to do research, but how many people of our nation, America, are Saxons and Celts and Germans and Anglo-Saxons, British and all that? And how many of them actually know what the word Saxon even means? Right. And if we trace that one word, Saxon, it gives us our heritage. Saxon translated means sons of Isaac. Yep. Isaac's sons. Right. And that's the name that Israel went by when they were taken into captivity by the Assyrians. And God punished Israel because of their idolatry and because of their worshiping other gods. And one of the punishments was they would forget who they were, and they'd be scattered. And if they're going to forget who they were, they couldn't be calling themselves Israelites anymore. But if we go into the book of Amos, we see that Israel, the northern 10 tribes, they had the name of Isaac was synonymous with Israel at that time, and that was right before they went into captivity.
You brought up Amos, which I'm actually there right now, and it's interesting. In the 5th chapter of Amos, and this is pretty much God talking to the house of Israel that's migrated. He goes on, have ye offered unto me sacrifices and offerings.
What verse are we at here?
It's between 25 and 26. Offerings unto the wilderness, or in the wilderness 40 years, O house of Israel. They didn't do really anything in that for the 40 years, I don't believe. So, but in verse 26 he says, but ye have borne the tabernacle of your Moloch and Kiun, which comes from, is a derivative of Cain, I believe. And your images, the star of your God, which ye have made to yourselves. And I believe you could possibly cross-reference that with the star of Remphan, Acts 7:43. That Paul was talking about.
Since you're at that verse, let's go to this question that we have here. I'm going to go back to the slide here, and because the verses you just read there tie in, I believe, with this question here. What was the mark that was placed upon Cain? Let's go back and read Genesis 4, and we'll come back to.
Okay.
Maybe we'll come back to the other scripture, or we'll just dig into it here. I'll go to Genesis 4. Genesis chapter 4, and then Cain, obviously everybody knows the story. He killed his brother Abel. And then the Lord, verse 9, I'll just pick it up there. And the Lord said unto Cain, where is Abel thy brother? And he said, I know not. Am I my brother's keeper? He's kind of being a smart aleck here. And he said, what hast thou done? The voice of thy brother's blood crieth unto me from the ground. And now art thou cursed from the earth, which hath opened her mouth to receive thy brother's blood from thy hand. Verse 12, when thou tillest the ground, it shall not henceforth yield unto thee her strength. A fugitive and a vagabond shalt thou be in the earth.
And so what's that saying? That they cannot grow anything, they cannot farm, possibly.
They can't be successful farmers. They can own the land, but have someone
else
work it.
It'd be a vagabond. They would have to be basically feeding off
merchants,
the other people, anyone else.
Merchants, just like the Federal Reserve today. They can't. They're not making money by real work. They have a false system they've created, a false set of balances.
They're like a parasite or a bloodsucker that has to live off other people.
Yep. Of usury. And so, that opens up, actually, this verse here, verse 12, gives us a lot of clues as to where Kenites are today, what they do for their occupation.
If they can't till the ground and have it yield anything to them, where are they going to go? They're going to have to live in the cities.
And like Jacob, he was a farmer, and he was blessed. The land was blessed for him to grow crops, to have cattle, and so forth. And you look at all the Christian nations of the world, they are the food producers. Not this small group of people that claims to be of Judah today. Many of them have this curse pronounced upon them. Verse 13, and Cain said unto the Lord, my punishment is greater than I can bear. Verse 14, behold, thou hast driven me out this day from the face of the earth, and from thy face shall I be hid. And I shall be a fugitive, a criminal even, and a vagabond in the earth, and it shall come to pass that everyone that findeth me shall slay me. So Cain's afraid. He's saying, how am I going to survive? How am I going to make a living? Everybody that sees me is going to kill me. Now check this out, what God does for him here. And the Lord said unto him, therefore, whosoever slayeth Cain, vengeance shall be taken on him sevenfold. And the Lord set a mark upon Cain, lest any finding him should kill him. And
interesting.
And then Cain went out from the presence of the Lord and dwelt in the land of Nod on the east of Eden. We probably don't have time to get into that today. But
don't you think that if you look at this in a rational way, part of that mark would be it would be actually covering him in secrecy,
right?
So that no one would know that he was of Cain, right? The descendants of Cain. So it would be kind of a secret covering over Cain, so that because if the world knew who they were, everybody in the world would want to kill them. But God is commanding here that they better not, or he's going to take vengeance on them. And of course, we know the reason why is because Cain, the descendants of Cain, the Kenites, have to fulfill the negative part of God's plan.
Right.
And they did that through the crucifixion of Christ, for one, and they're doing it now as we see the time coming soon when the Antichrist will come and they'll usher in that era.
Right, and where this verse ties into is the tares that Christ spoke of in Matthew chapter 13. When he showed his disciples who the tares were, he said they are the children of the wicked one. Mm-hmm. And then they said, Lord, he was using the parable there. He said, Lord, should we gather them up? Should we go kill them, basically, is what he's saying.
Yeah.
And Jesus said, no, leave them alone until the harvest, and the angels will reap them up, because it'll do more harm than good. Yeah. Plus, they have to fulfill that negative part of the serpent seed prophecy of Genesis 3:15.
Right. And besides that, people are going to would be calling everybody a Kenite, and they'd be making mistakes. They wouldn't even get the right people. They'd be killing their own people.
Right. It could be leading catastrophe.
Yeah. It would be a witch hunt.
That's why I believe God has hidden this from most of the world.
Sure.
This truth about who the Kenites are.
Yeah.
But let's go into this mark here. I got a book here. If anybody has never read this before, it's a book called The 6-Pointed Star. It's by Dr. O.J. Graham. And I believe this was a Jewish man who wrote this book. And it is one of the best short, concise documentation of this symbol and even the false, those who claim to be of Judah and are not, but are of the synagogue of Satan.
And the symbol being the 6-pointed star or the hexagram,
right.
two equilateral triangles put on top of each other.
Right. I believe that this is the mark of Cain, the mark that he uses, possibly even the mark of the beast in symbolism, anyways. And I'm going to read a couple quotes here from. I'm going to read the back of this book from the 6-Pointed Star. Originally pagan, the 6-pointed star or hexagram has been used in Baal worship from the days of Genesis. Rebuked in Amos 5, verse 26. That's where we were just at, right? Mm-hmm. With the star of Remphan and so forth. Mm-hmm. It became known as the seal of Solomon after Solomon married the daughter of Pharaoh, built an altar to Ashtoreth, and entered into Baal worship. And we know, obviously, Solomon did fall into that and was punished for that.
And his punishment was that his son would not rule over all of Israel, and Israel would be divided into two kingdoms.
Right. Since then, the usage has continued in Solomonic rituals in the craft Freemasonry. Long used in magic and witchcraft, the 6-pointed star has been used as the chief symbol of worship to Molech in burnt human sacrificial rituals. I'm going to mention something that just came to my mind here. The word Holocaust actually means a burnt sacrifice. Weird why they would name it that. But anyways, used by the Druids and astrologers, the 6-pointed star has been used consistently in the occult, and he even mentions it here, and was used by occultist Adolf Hitler during the Holocaust. In more recent times, it has replaced the 7-branch candlestick, which was given to the Israelites as an everlasting covenant. Is the 666 seen in the 6-pointed star a sign of things to come? And there is more, much more. So, there are a lot of sixes all over this symbol. There are 6 points, 6 sides, 6 angles. This 6-pointed star is just completely marked with 6s. Now I'm going to go to a quote here from this book. This 6-pointed star is a hexagram.
Yeah. Now,
here in this book, I don't have the page number down here. I might try to get it for the listeners, but it says King Solomon built an altar for Ashtoreth, worshipped her, and also practiced Moloch rituals. It was at this time that the hexagram, or 6-pointed star, came to be called the seal of Solomon. How do dictionaries define hexagram? Well, here it is. The root word hex is defined as an evil spell, a witch, i.e. to bewitch, and so forth.
Interesting points.
Yeah, so I'm going to go to this. There's this other one that was a little bit more interesting. This one's pretty neat, too. I'm going to go through it quickly here. I'm going to start right here about in the middle here. It says, it confirms that the 6-pointed star was called Solomon's seal the resplendent star of macrocosm. Am I saying that right?
Yeah, it sounds right.
Okay.
Microcosm, macrocosm.
We'll go with it. And further defines it as the most simple and complete abridgment of the science of all things. It tells of the magical dogma of its three-in-one concept, just like the Trinity. And that's, I'm not going to go into this today, but really soon, and while we're going through Revelation, we're going to talk about the satanic Trinity of the dragon, the beast 1 I got here, and beast 2 would be the false prophet. So I think the symbol is even tells us of the satanic Trinity. I'm going to go to one more slide, I think, here, because I mentioned that I believe that this symbol was the mark of Cain. In 1822, it was adopted by the Rothschild family and put on their coat of arms. The story of the Rothschild family is an intriguing one. It began in the 17th century in Frankfurt, Germany, where one Mayor Amschel Bauer hung a red hexagram or six-pointed star on his door to identify his address. Soon after this, Mayor Amschel Bauer began supplying coins to Prince William of Hanau, and upon becoming supplier to the court, he changed his family name to Rothschild, meaning red shield. And I didn't have it here. I thought it was on here, but another page in this book, I believe, it said that they used it, the Rothschild family used it and put it on their door as a symbol to protect their house. Sort of like we put the blood of the Lamb on our doorpost, which is the faith in Christ now, to protect our house. They use this to protect them. Maybe it's a sign that God recognizes and says, "Yep, I did place that mark upon Cain."
Well,
for
I
his
think
protection.
it's important
Maybe
to
they're
note
invoking that.
6 is the number of man. The number, even in Revelation 13, the number of the beast, the mark of the beast, it was a number of man. It was 603 score and 6, three
Right.
sixes. So, is there a link? Yes.
Right, absolutely. And it's a star. What is Lucifer called? He was the bright morning star.
Yep.
So I think this symbol says a lot. I think just as simple as it is, I think it tells you a lot about our enemy and how he operates. We could go on and on about this symbol, but if anybody wants to do a deeper study on what I believe to be the mark of Cain, as well as the mark of the beast, is the six-pointed star. This is that symbol.
That's a good point.
And when you look at it, this symbol is what's flying over that land today that's preparing the way for the false Messiah.
I agree with that.
Right. Anybody else have anything else they want to go to?
No, the only other thing I have was Amos chapter 6. Basically, Hemath is also brought up in that chapter as well. Amos
6, which verse?
The last verse, 14, God saying, "But behold, I will raise up against you, O nation, O house of Israel, saith the Lord God of hosts, and they shall afflict you from the entering in of Hemath unto the river of the wilderness." So, right. I don't know, does that mean afflict you from inside those lands? The land of Canaan over there? Or?
Well, of course, this is right before the Assyrian captivity. So it's the Assyrians are going to invade. Yeah, soon, right after this, the Assyrians will invade, and they take in 722 BC. They take the whole kingdom of Israel, the northern kingdom, and take them out of the land and deport them to the northern borders.
Is this kind of defining a border of the land of Canaan? Being the entering of Hemath unto the river of the wilderness or something, that land there was going to be taken into captivity? And if so, could you say logically that we're talking about there's some sort of link there to
I don't know. You're saying Hemath. I think it says Hemath here. But is it the same as Hemath?
No, it's Hemath here and then Hemath up in verse
14.
2.
So
yeah, it's
I got Hemath in verse 14.
Huh? I don't. Hemath.
You got Hemath?
Yep.
Oh, okay.
Blue Letter Bible.
I tell you what. Let's go to some closing scriptures concerning some prophecy. of concerning prophecy about the Kenites. And it's in Numbers chapter 24. And I'm just going to read through it here rather quickly. Numbers 24, verse 15. And perhaps we might even do another study, a follow-up study on the Kenites if there are a lot more points that you guys want to bring up. We'll see how that works out. Numbers 24, verse 15. And he took up his parable and said, Balaam, the son of Beor, has said, and the man whose eyes are open has said. He has said, which heard the words of God and knew the knowledge of the Most High, which saw the vision of the Almighty, falling into a trance, but having his eyes open. I shall see him, but not now. I shall behold him, but not nigh. There shall come a star out of Jacob, and a scepter shall rise out of Israel, and shall smite the corners of Moab, and destroy all the children of Sheth. So obviously the star that comes out of Jacob, everybody knows the Christmas star.
This is not the Star of Remphan.
Right. This is the Star of Bethlehem, the star that announced Christ's birth. So what you have here, which is very interesting, I think, because we're talking about this six-pointed star, is you have two opposite stars, two morning stars even in Scripture. Mm-hmm. Satan was the morning star that went bad, and Christ is the true morning star.
Good point. And
you see that in this prophecy of where the Kenites are going to be mentioned. Verse 18, and Edom shall be a possession, Seir shall also be a possession for his enemies, and Israel shall do valiantly. Out of Jacob shall come he that shall have dominion, and shall destroy him that remaineth of the city. Again, speaking of Christ. In Revelation, it talks about him coming with a rod of iron and to rule the nations of the world. The Messiah that the people in Israel today, the land of Israel, reject. Verse 20, and he looked on Amalek, he took up his parable and said, Amalek was the first of the nations, but his latter end shall be that he perish forever. Now look at this. Verse 21, and he looked on the Kenites, the sons of Cain, and took up his parable, and said, strong is thy dwelling place, and thou puttest thy nest in a rock. So, in other words, they are in a secure location where they think they cannot be harmed. Verse 22, nevertheless, the Kenite shall be wasted, until Asher shall carry thee away captive. And then he goes, alas, who shall live when we see these things? So there is actually a prophecy that the Kenites will be destroyed. They will be wasted.
And it's interesting that Manhattan is basically built on rock.
Oh, okay. Manhattan Island?
Yeah.
Where most of the money changers live today?
Yeah.
Interesting. Well, you know what? I wish we could keep going on and on, but I think we've gone long enough for this session.